suerte de contar aquí con Larry Dwyer. Larry Dwyer, pues, digamos, el principal experto, si quieren, sobre eso que está ahí escrito. Es el autor más citado internacionalmente en competitividad turística y en muchos otros campos. Digamos, dentro de lo que es la economía del turismo, ha sido desde la Universidad de Nueva Gales del Sur un autor pionero en Australia, ¿no? Un autor pionero. Saben que el desarrollo de los estudios de turismo, pues a lo largo de las últimas décadas, pues tiene en Australia un polo de referencia muy fuerte, y Larry Dwyer, en el ámbito ya más concreto de la economía del turismo, pues puede considerarse como el autor con un legado más importante. Recientemente han publicado un artículo que, si les interesa, pues lo distribuimos, con, digamos, todas las contribuciones que el Instituto de Investigación Turística que él ha liderado durante todas estas últimas décadas en Australia, pues ha conseguido en un modelo de combinación entre sector público y sector privado en Australia, digamos, con aporte de financiación del sector privado y con el desarrollo de la investigación en diversas universidades. Pero repito que para nosotros es una suerte, un placer tener aquí al profesor Larry Dwyer, y espero que disfruten de su seminario.
Gracias. Thank you, Raul. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you will be able to understand my accent. I am speaking English, but it's with an Australian accent, and so some of the words might be a little bit difficult for you to understand, so I apologise in advance for that. I'm going to talk about destination competitiveness, and the background to the talk is that there's substantial change taking place in the tourism industry worldwide, both on the demand side and on the supply side. And these changes are going to influence the types of experiences that tourists will seek now and into the future. There's these trends taking place. Management theorists call them pest factors. Political, economic, socio-cultural, technological. Since then they've added another E, environmental. So these are trends that are affecting all industries on the planet Earth, but they have particular relevance for tourism, these particular drivers, and it changes the context for doing business. And achieving destination competitiveness is a very important thing, because all destinations in the world are competing with one another and seeking to enhance the competitiveness of their tourism industry. And the more competitive it is, the more tourists will come, and those tourists will spend their money. There will be economic effects, increases in income, jobs, and so on. Now, the notion of destination competitiveness is linked to the ability of a destination to outperform others. Destination competitiveness is a relative concept. It means that the destination is doing better than other destinations in delivering goods and services that tourists want and that are important to them. Now, it's a general concept. It's a complex concept, destination competitiveness. There's lots of sub-elements to it. It has to do with price differentials. The price levels in different tourism destinations affects the competitiveness of the destination. Productivity levels are important. Productivity is output per unit of input. Productivity is about the efficiency of production. And the more efficient a destination is, the more it can produce output using fewer inputs. It means it's more productive. And of course there's qualitative effects, affecting the attractiveness or otherwise of a destination. It might be scenic vistas, it might be lovely sunsets, it might be lakes and rivers and mountains and majestic peaks and snow-capped mountains and so on. These are qualitative factors which are very difficult to measure because we all have subjective views of this. I was touring with my family in Zadar, or in Croatia recently, or a few years ago now, and my sister was touring with us, and I experienced the most majestic sunset. It was just absolutely beautiful sunset, and the whole of Zadar was bathed in a purple glow, and I was experiencing the joy of this sunset, and my sister kept looking at her watch because she wanted to get back to the hotel to have a shower and get ready for dinner. So obviously we had different perceptions of the relevance of that experience. Now, all stakeholders need to know what's happening with respect to destination competitiveness. And in English, a stakeholder is someone with an interest in a certain outcome. Tourism stakeholders are those with an interest in tourism doing well. That can be people who own tourism facilities, people who manage them, people who work in tourism, people who supply goods and services to tourism, members of the community who have an interest in tourism being a good provider of income and jobs. Governments have an interest in the tourism industry doing well. Environmental groups have an interest in tourism being good environmentally. All of these are stakeholders in tourism. And if we can develop models of destination competitiveness, then it enables us to do certain things. Identify the key strengths and weaknesses of a destination. Highlight opportunities for tourism development and develop strategies to counter possible threats and challenges. This is why we develop models of destination competitiveness. Now, there's some general frameworks that have been developed. Crouch and Ritchie, two researchers there. I've done some work. Obviously, he's a Korean, Kim. There's, I think, 30 million people or 50 million people in Korea, and about 49 million are all called Kim, which makes it difficult if you go to Korea and look up the telephone book for somebody that you want to contact. If their name is Kim, it's very difficult. And there's the Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Index called the TTCI. These are general frameworks, and I'm going to talk about these. But then there's a competitiveness by type of tourism supply. And I've been doing work recently in this area. It's called importance performance analysis. And I think that that's an interesting type of analysis of competitiveness. I'll talk about that as well. Now, in the general models, you have these items which are considered to be very important in any model of tourism development. Endowed resources are natural resources, such as mountains, lakes, beaches, rivers, climate, and so on. Then there's cultural heritage resources, cuisine, handicrafts, the language people speak, their customs, the clothes people wear, the food they eat, the music that they sing, the dances that they do, the clothes they dress in, their belief systems. All of those are part of the heritage of a destination. Then there's created resources, human-made resources. Tourism infrastructure, that's the hotels, the wet and wild, the facilities that tourists use, special events that are created to bring tourists into a destination, the type and range of available activities that are human-made activities, entertainment, shopping, which is now more important. All of these are created resources. Then there's supporting factors and resources. the general infrastructure, transport system, telecommunication, power system, financial sector, and so on. Quality of services that are on offer, the accessibility of a destination. You know, a destination may have all sorts of very good attributes, but be very difficult to get to. And the Canary Islands is one such destination. There are some good links from the mainland, but by and large, from many parts of the world, getting to the Canary Islands is quite difficult in terms of access. The hospitality offered at a destination, and market ties. Market ties could be sporting ties, religious ties, ethnic ties, and so on. And these can determine tourism flows. Together, all of these resources help to determine the competitiveness of a destination. But then you have situational conditions. These vary according to certain forces that operate at a particular time. And I like to think of the situational conditions as falling into two areas. One is the operating environment. Now, there's a technique that economists use to talk about the operating environment, and it's called a structure, conduct, performance model. And it's to do with the rivalry between firms, the extent of competition, the relationship between firms and suppliers. It's economic conditions. But there's also a remote environment. And this bedevils management because elements in the remote environment are beyond the control of any particular firms. These are those trends such as economic trends, social trends, demographic trends, technological changes, environmental changes, political changes, and these are beyond the control of particular managers. And so that makes strategies to develop competitiveness very difficult because you've got these trends taking place. For example, an economic issue was a few years back. We had the global financial crisis, that the world financial institutions were affected primarily by events in the USA which spread internationally, affecting people's incomes, loss of jobs and so on, and affected tourism quite badly. Well, that is one of those trends that no individual operator can have control over. What they have to do is develop strategies to cope, and that can be a very difficult thing. Then, that's the structure, conduct, performance model. I won't go into that. It's just a tool that economists use to analyse any industry. An industry has a certain market structure. Firms have particular ways of conducting their activities, and we can rate the performance of firms and so on. I won't go into that now, but that is relevant to the situational conditions which I described as the operator environment. There's too much there. Basically, when I think of destination management, I think of two types of management. One is by public sector, that is government management. And the other is by firms in the private sector management. Now, public sector management concerns things like the development of, the development of national tourism strategies, destination management organisation, destination marketing management, destination policy, planning, development, human resource development, education and training, environmental management. They are public sector responsibilities. All of those are at the higher level of government managing an economy. Whereas you can then have the activities of the private sector And these are the ordinary types of management issues that we associate with individual firms, you know, and industry associations. Firms do destination marketing. Industry has training programs. Industry develops new products. Industry undertakes operations to address certain environmental issues and so on. So these are destination management. Very important, because the better an economy is managed and the better the private sector is managed, the more likely it is that a destination can be competitive against other destinations. Then you have demand conditions. These are also important in considering the destination competitiveness. And these I just talk here about tourist preferences, awareness of destination, and destination image. All of these are important because, after all, if a destination is being competitive, it means that it must appeal to tourists. People must want to go there. People will have valued experiences if they go to that destination. And so the types of products and services that are developed in a destination need to take account of the values of tourists. So we need to know tourist preferences, that actual visitation will depend on the match between tourist preferences and perceived destination offerings. In other words, a destination must evolve its tourism industry with a knowledge of what tourist preferences are. Because after all, if you just build things that tourists don't value, they're not going to bother coming. Tourists must be aware of a destination. Now, I have to say, from where I come from, there's not much knowledge of where the Canary Islands are. And certainly in America, there would be much less knowledge of the Canary Islands, because Americans don't really know much about anywhere that's outside their own borders, you know. I was in a restaurant in Atlanta, Georgia, and the waitress said to me, "You sure do talk funny. Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Australia." And she said, "Is that near Illinois?" And I said, "It's southwest of there." And she said, "I thought so." Seriously, I'm serious. I was once showing an American something on a map, and I showed them where Australia was, and they said, "Oh, that's interesting. And what's all that blue there in the map?" I said, that's the Pacific Ocean. So there must be an awareness of a destination, or people won't make plans to go there. And of course, destination image. Sometimes a destination has a false image, or an image that is better than it deserves to be, or worse than it deserves to be. And this is the realm of marketing organisations that address the issue of the destination image. And I've developed a model with Kim, and this is just a way of displaying what I've talked about there. And the model has been used by researchers around the world to look at their particular destinations, using the types of categories that we developed in the original model. And that's good. And the more studies that are done, the more we find out about different destinations, and the more we can then improve the model as a result of seeing how well it works as an explanation for competitiveness in particular destinations. Now, one of the issues is, how do you test the model? What are the indicators of destination competitiveness? Well, the problem is that, first of all, destination competitiveness is an intermediate goal between a more fundamental aim. Why do you want your destination to be competitive? The answer is, you want it to be competitive because that is good for the people who live in the destination. It's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about the socio-economic prosperity of the people who live in the destination. That's why you want your destination to be competitive. Not because of the tourists as such. I mean, you want them to be happy, you want them to come, you want them to repeat, but you are concerned primarily about the people who live in the destination. So there's been very little work done in the literature on destination competitiveness, linking the models up with this goal of socio-economic prosperity. Very little done there, so there's scope for you guys to do some research there. Also, there's no single or unique set of competitiveness indicators. If I said to you, oh, what's an important indicator of competitiveness? You might say, oh, good surfing beaches, good beaches. Well, is that important to Las Vegas, which is in the middle of the desert? Las Vegas doesn't have good beaches, doesn't have any beaches, but it gets a lot of tourists because it has other things to offer. Do you see the point? You can't just highlight a particular set of indicators and say that that is important. And so what needs to be done, therefore, and what this flags, is that we need to develop sets of indicators that are relevant to different destinations. We can't just have one set that applies across the board. Now, we're also confronted with the issue of hard measures and soft measures. Now, a hard measure will be one that's quantifiable. So, I could talk about tourism numbers, expenditure by the government on supporting tourism, the amount of foreign direct investment in tourism. I can attach dollar values to those things. They're hard indicators. But what about the friendliness of the people, the hospitality on offer, the impressiveness of the culture and the diversity of the culture and so on, the lovely sunsets or the beautiful climate? How do you measure those things? These are soft indicators. So you can see that the researcher has real difficulties here in confronting those different types of indicators. And of course the importance of competitiveness indicators will vary across locations depending on the product mix and target market segments. So the Russians might value something about a destination, while other people from other locations may not value that thing at all. So soccer hooligans, or football hooligans, when they go to different countries, might like the countries that have the most pubs, right? And beer on offer. Whereas other tourists might want more natural wonders, lakes and mountains and rivers and so on. So often, what is competitive is in the mind of the tourist. And so there's lots of interesting issues here that we need to be confronted. Oh, these are just some of market performance hard indicators. See, all of those can be given, can be quantified, but the other factors can be more subjective. Now, destination price competitiveness, that's one aspect of competitiveness. In the past, it used to be well, it's still important, but in past years, the world seemed to be divided quite closely into those countries that had fairly high prices and those countries that had fairly low prices. And many people would go to those low-priced countries for their tourism. And so we have studies of the responsiveness of tourism demand to changes in tourism prices. And there is an association. The association does exist that tourists prefer lower priced destinations. And that's pretty obvious. Other things equal, you would rather go somewhere that is cheaper than another place. However, you want also that place to be attractive and have other types of attributes. Now, in their destination choice decisions, tourists consider, a few things. One is that they consider the prices of goods and services at the destination. So when you're deciding to go somewhere, you might check into how much does it cost for a hotel? How much do meals cost? How much would it cost if I go on a tour? What are the prices in the destination? But also, you'd want to also look at the price of goods and services at home, so you compare prices elsewhere to prices at home, because you can always stay at home. And you can always say, oh, that's much more expensive than it is where I live. So you compare them to price at home, but you also compare them to substitute destinations. So if you're thinking of going to, let's say, Poland next year, you would compare the prices that exist in Poland compared to the prices in the Czech Republic, the prices in Germany, and so on. So the decision that people make is a fairly complex one. It's not just a simple decision about prices. There involve comparisons here. And look, some of the determinants of prices I list there. I won't go into these in detail, but exchange rates are important. Not so much for you guys because you're in the Eurozone, and so whenever you go to places, exchange rates won't terribly much be changing in the Eurozone. But for someone like me, exchange rates can change quite significantly. Australia, as many countries has a floating exchange. Our dollar floats. So it's very susceptible to changes in international trade and international economy. And so exchange rate changes can make it more or less expensive to travel. Inflation and overall price levels can change depending on a country's inflation rate. Labour prices, wage rates can change, affecting the price of tourism, goods and services. Productivity changes. I mentioned before, efficiencies within a country can affect the prices charged. Export booms and Dutch disease, I won't go into that here, but if a country is exporting lots and lots of other commodities, other than tourism, that can affect the prices internally of tourism experiences. I gave a lecture on that a couple of days ago. Tax levels can affect prices. That's why tourism operators are very reluctant to agree to tax increases, because if you increase taxes, as governments want to do, it increases the prices within the destination. And the thing about tourism is it's called exporting taxes. Politicians, governments love to tax people, but especially foreigners, because foreigners don't vote. You know, if they tax locals, the locals complain and vote against them in the election. But foreigners aren't as powerful. And so the problem with tourism worldwide is that all country after country after country, they're increasing taxes. And that is making tourism as a global industry much more expensive compared to other industries. Fuel prices and taxation, often fuel price of living, and environmental charges. We know that there are all sorts of environmental charges levied. There's talk about different carbon taxes and so on to try and mitigate the effects of global warming and so on. That's fine, that's very admirable, but of course any countries that attempt to introduce such charges can suffer a loss of competitiveness. In Australia, our tourism body is all in favour of environmental charges, but as long as it doesn't affect tourism. But the problem is, when the government introduced a carbon tax on all purchases of any goods and services with a carbon content, it raised prices. And the tourism industry then thought, oh no, it's making Australia less price competitive. And so the tourism industry then was arguing against carbon taxes. So on the one hand, it was wanting the environmental issues to be addressed. On the other hand, it did not want the tourism industry to have to suffer relative to other destinations worldwide. Anyway, that's some of the issues that I've been dealing with in my work. And now we come on to this Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Index that's developed by the World Economic Forum. And if anyone's interested, you just look up the Google World Economic Forum and this Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Index, and you can see the competitiveness of 141 countries discussed worldwide, and it's downloadable for free. And so I think it's a very good tool, and researchers are using this. I'm just going to mention some aspects of this. There are, that didn't come out very well, there are 14 pillars in this Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Index, and they're intended to capture some of the main elements relevant to destination competitiveness. So there's, no, the yellow doesn't come out very well there, I can hardly read it. What does it say? Anyway, there are these different indexes, and this is a business index. It's something to do with business index and so on. And then you have business environment, safety and security, health and hygiene, human resources and labour market, information, communication, technology readiness. Then you have the prioritisation of travel and tourism, how important it is to the government, how open the economy is, price competitiveness, environmental sustainability. Then you have infrastructure, transportation, land, sea and air, and then you have natural and cultural resources. Well, these constitute the overall framework for this, for these measures of destination competitiveness worldwide. And the key findings in the latest study show that travel and tourism industry continues to grow quickly, but it's proven very resilient to shocks. And this is interesting because when there's a disaster, tourists may stop going there, but not for long. Very soon afterwards, tourists return. And so the tourism industry is finding that we as a group, tourists, are not being deterred by natural disasters or terrorism and so on for very long. Tourism bounces back really quickly. And that is interesting for the tourism industry, because no matter how bad things are in a destination at any particular time, the likelihood is quite soon the tourists will come back. Now, developing travel and tourism sector provides growth opportunities for all countries, regardless of their wealth, and offers job opportunities at all skill levels. That's what they've found. So the tourism industry is found to be a very important industry in any economy. But the development of the travel and tourism industry is complex. It requires a lot of coordination at government level and coordination both internally between private sector and public sector, but also internationally, public-private partnerships. In other words, they're saying the tourism industry is a complex industry that requires a lot of networking. And there's a whole set of issues involved in the importance of networking in tourism that emerge from this, these studies. I mentioned about the resilience of travel and tourism. The tourism industry continues to grow more quickly than the world economy. The reason for this is that the biggest push or support for tourism is income and wealth. As economies grow and people become wealthier, there's more travel. And tourism is what's called a discretionary expenditure. People don't have to travel. But when they get more income, people tend to spend more money on those things that are discretionary. So if you get more income, you don't say, oh good, now I've got more income, I can buy more salt or bread. These are necessities of life. What you say is, oh, I can now spend more money on those items that are of a more discretionary or experiential sort. The tourism travel industry has shown surprising resilience to geopolitical tensions, terrorism, pandemics such as bird flu, avian flu, SARS and so on, and sluggish economic growth. If one country is hit by instability, the tourists simply go elsewhere for a while, then they come back. And the ground lost during a negative event can be quickly regained as soon as the situation comes back to normal. So the World Tourism Organization is taking account of this, that tourism is a very resilient industry. And these didn't come out, unfortunately. This was just some trends between global tourism and GDP growth. Basically, as tourism grows, then the GDP of countries grow. But I won't. Trends, increasing purchasing power in emerging and developing countries drives the demand for travel. I mentioned that. And the index can be used to identify opportunities that countries have in developing their tourism industry. Now, figure 4, yes, this has, on the vertical axis, is the TTC, some sort of scale of the importance of the country. That's on the vertical axis. On the horizontal axis is international tourist expenditure growth. And so what we find is that those countries that are here in this quadrant that have the most developed tourism industries and that come out the best on the rankings, the expenditure growth is lower than average. So those countries, North America, Western Europe, are not growing as fast as other countries. Whereas down here we have countries where they're not doing so well in terms of rankings on competitiveness, but international tourism expenditure is growing very fast. And so the indexes can be used to diagnose problems. For example, if it is the case that expenditure in these high-ranking countries is not growing as fast, then it flags an issue. How can we there then increase tourism expenditure? What sorts of strategies do we need to adopt? Anyway, I won't go into that, but this is a diagnostic tool that can be used to develop strategies for different countries. Tourism provides opportunities for all, and this is another finding from the latest study. It can have significant impact on countries at all stages of development, can produce short-term economic effects and longer-term spillover effects on the wider economy. It's relatively labour intensive. What that means is that in providing goods and services, tourism generates lots of employment, and that is something that policymakers should be aware of, that tourism is a good creator of jobs. And more than that, a good employer of women and young people than most industries, creating more opportunities for small, medium enterprises. So tourism has big advantages over other industries, and these are reasons why tourism should be supported by governments. Increasingly, also, it's demanding high-skilled workers in areas such as information communications technology, management and marketing. When I started out doing tourism research, by and large, there was a view that you didn't have to have skills in tourism. If you worked there, you just had to have a nice smile, a good manner on the telephone, or you can open taxi doors and hotel doors for customers and so on. But now there's a realisation that tourism needs high skills in many of its operations, and this has implications for tourism training. And coordination is important. As I said, some of the tasks are often beyond the scope of local administration, and you need the support of high-level government to support the tourism industry, overcoming financial, institution, organisational bottlenecks. And so this is something that's emerged from the literature as well. Well, in the last, the 2015 report of the TCI, there was a business perspective. Major firms in tourism gave a perspective of some of the issues that were particularly affecting businesses at the present time. In many countries there are administrative barriers hindering the movement of people, such as visas and so on, impediments to progress, because tourism needs free flows between borders. And that's complicated these days too, with the refugees and various bad guys wanting to cross borders. So there are real issues there. Perceptions of instability are increasingly influencing tourism flows. Business is a bit concerned about the instability in many destinations and the effect that has on tourism flows. But then the tourists, as I said, tend to go elsewhere rather than stay at home altogether. Increasing difficulties in attracting top talent. Apparently tourism is still not able to secure the high skill levels that it wants because there are higher wages offered in other sectors. And I know from my own experience in Australia and elsewhere, very bright, very good people graduate with tourism degrees. They've got very good knowledge of the industry and so on, but they get jobs in other sectors because those other sectors can pay more. Changes in the composition of tourism demand will define business strategies, and this flags the importance of good marketing effort to understand the customer, and that's very important in the tourism industry. Understand customer needs and then provide them with what they value. Increasing attention to reducing the carbon footprint. Tourism has to play its weight alongside other industries, and there's a big push now for tourism, to all tourism firms, to reduce carbon footprint. I know in many cases of conferences that I go to internationally, the conveners of conferences now ask the conference venue what their carbon footprint is, and select venues for conferences based on the low carbon footprint. It becomes a very important element of making a choice where to hold a conference and what facilities to use. Often though, we have investments in infrastructure increasingly lagging behind industry growth. In other words, tourism depends on good road systems, good transportation, good telecommunications, etc., which are government funded. And sometimes the tourism industry wants to move ahead fast, but the government lags behind in providing essential services. And that is another reason why there should be much more discussion between the tourism industry and other government agencies. And of course, new technologies and innovations are revolutionising the industry. you guys would know more about it than me, about the role of digital technology and information technology and so on with smartphones and how they can be used by tourists and so on. So there's a lot happening there in tourism. Spain. I'm just going to mention some aspects of Spain that came from this, the latest report. #1 ranking in 2014. So congratulations, guys. You are ranked as the top tourism destination in the world. You're the 3rd most visited country. 60.6 million arrivals, about 14 of which go to the Canary Islands. I think 14 million. Yeah. A surge in visitors from emerging markets, Brazil, China, Mexico. These are obviously very fast-growing economies and sending visitors worldwide. You're #1 in cultural resources and for business travellers. A significant number of international conferences. You're #4 in online searches for entertainment, restaurants, nightlife and attractions. #4 in tourism service infrastructure. #6 in the prioritisation of travel and tourism industry. That is the extent to which the government supports the industry. So these are very, very healthy. But you're low in business environment, red tape, bureaucracy. That may not surprise you. You know, construction permits, inefficient legal framework. You have a rigid labour market, 113 in the world, and a mismatch between workers' rewards and productivity. In other words, it looks like Spanish people are underpaid relative to what they should be getting in terms of what productivity considerations would determine. But anyway, overall, it's pretty good. But what the index flags is issues where Spain can now address, issues that need to be addressed if Spain is to maintain its #1 ranking. The Travel and Tourism Index has various rankings here in respect of certain of those categories that I put up before. And the sort of spiderweb type diagram is interesting. Spain is the blue, and Europe and the Caucasus is the red. Now, where Spain is outside means that Spain is doing better. And, you know, it's outside most of the time. Spain is doing better on most of those items, except the ones that I flagged. The inside one, business environment, so here and so on, you know, that's not so good. And here, it's just about on par. Anyway, look, that's just a diagnostic tool that can be used then by policymakers to then determine types of strategies that should be used. These are just things that I just downloaded. I pasted from the report, which I said, you know, is freely downloadable. Here we have the red is international tourism receipts, and the blue are international tourism arrivals. Now, from an economist's point of view, it's the receipts that are important, not the numbers. Because numbers of people create social and environmental costs. But their expenditure is important because that has a good economic effects. And so what we find here is that, by and large, say, for example, this period from 2002 to 2005 was a very good time for Spain because the receipts were increasing much more substantially than the numbers, which meant that the Spanish tourism experience was providing a high yield experience. People, foreigners, were paying more for those experiences. They were increasing at a faster rate than the numbers. And it's always a good idea. You can use this, as a diagnostic tool to determine the association between the numbers and the numbers of people and the rate of change in the expenditure. This is just, that's what you find if you look at the report. You'll see for each of those categories, then there's various sub-indicators. So for air transport infrastructure, for example, there's the quality of the air transport infrastructure. There's the airline seat kilometres, available seat kilometres per week. There's the number of departures. There's the airport density. There's the number of operating airlines. Quite a comprehensive set of indexes and saying. Okay, what are the implications of this? Well, it can play an important role in highlighting areas of strength, weaknesses, opportunities and threats related to destination competitiveness. It's a diagnostic tool, so we can attempt to develop strategies, develop policies to build on strengths, eliminate weaknesses, pursue opportunities and counter threats. So I think it's a very good tool for that. And I know that there are students, doctoral students, that are using this index and milking it for all the good information it can provide about destination strategies. Okay, so the next thing I want to go on to is another way of looking at this, and it's a technique called importance performance analysis. It is not an attempt to develop an index of competitiveness of a country as a whole, but what it does is it focuses on particular markets within the tourism sector and determines the importance of that market and the performance of the destination in that respect. It's called importance performance analysis, and it's been used to inform research in a variety of tourism contexts. All of these are particular markets. You see, that's not the destination as a whole, it's particular markets. So for example, wildlife parks. You can determine the importance of some elements that should be associated with wildlife parks, and then the performance of a country or region or location in respect of elements that will enhance the performance of those parks. So, an IPA matrix, and I'll put up what that looks like in a minute. It can be constructed for a particular facility, such as Cedar National Park, a particular destination. We could do it for Tenerife or for Gran Canaria, or we can do it for a special interest tourism market, such as the ones I've nominated or any others. Or for travel motivation, business travel, honeymoon, conventions market. And what it looks like, I'll come back to, is that's a very simple analytical device, extremely simple. It's a diagnostic tool. What we do is we survey people. We select a particular market. It might be Cedar National Park, right, where the volcano is. And so we ask, we give respondents a list of things that we think are important, but we don't know. It's up to them to determine which are more important than not. And we ask them to rank it on a Likert scale, say 1 to 7. It might be accommodation facilities, it might be restaurants, it might be hiking trails, it might be scenic lookouts, and so on. And the respondents rank these in terms of their importance for a national park. what are the important things that a national park should have. Yes, hiking trails, scenic lookouts, accommodation, camping areas, good transport to get there. All of these things are ranked in importance. And then we ask them, how is this particular facility performing in respect of those? Performing in respect of scenic walks, performing in respect of making accommodation facilities available, performing in terms of good transportation. And so when we put the results together, they can be in any of the 4 boxes. For instance, here, to keep up the good work, these would be items where they're ranked in terms of high importance and high performance. In other words, our destination is performing well on items that are important for this particular niche market. And so that's keep up the good work. Whereas, if we are performing very well on things that are not so important, so if we're here, we're performing well in things that are not so important, that could be overkill. We might be putting too many resources into something, because it's not important. It's nice to overperform, but maybe we should allocate resources elsewhere. Down here, we are performing, well, in certain attributes which are of low importance, we are also performing poorly. But it's low priority, because it doesn't much matter if you're performing poorly if the items aren't important anyway. But here is where we have low performance in items which are considered to be of high importance. And that's concentrated here. Because we don't want that situation to occur. We don't want to be performing poorly on items that are of high importance. And so it's a diagnostic tool. And the advantages, it can incorporate consumer input, supplier input, and we can look at different visitor markets, different types of facilities. As I said, you could do it for Tenerife as a whole. You could do it for a particular facility, such as the National Park. You could do it for a particular market, such as conventions market, or honeymoon market, or beach tourism, and so on. It offers a basis for strategy development and policy formulation. And I've been doing some work in this with some Slovenian researchers, and we've been looking at Serbia and Slovenia in terms of this importance performance analysis. Well, the limitations, I won't go into those. There's always limitations involved in consumer surveys, and the limitations basically relate to the problems of converting survey responses into results that are useful for policy. The further research, I think that we need to incorporate consumer input and perceptions in the context of specific destinations. And that's why I mentioned IPA. The general models that I've been a part of formulating, and others, go so far, but then stop. And what we don't know enough about is the consumer side, what consumer preferences are. And I believe that IPA, in its importance performance analysis, gives us the opportunity to survey the consumer side and to survey particular firms and so on. And I think that can build up our knowledge of different market segments. And the resulting gains will be more informed policy making regarding the type of tourism development most likely to enhance visitor experiences and resident socio-quality of life. Because if you get that combination of enhancing visitor experiences, they're going to come back, right? And they're going to publicise by word of mouth the enjoyable time they have. And also it helps the resident socio-economic quality of life, which after all is what it's all about, as I've argued. And so that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. I normally put a gracias there at the end, and it wasn't there, so I apologise for that, but I normally thank you. Are there any questions? I know that you're a diverse group. I know that many of you find this very unfamiliar, others would have found it much more familiar. But are there any questions that you have?
You may have one if nobody wants. So you have mentioned that tourist competitiveness is a tool to achieve the destination, I mean that the residents have a better level of life. But what the other way around? How are social factors like destination is poverty or there is inequality in economy, is that affecting the destination competitiveness at some point? Because many of the big destinations like Indonesia or even similar destinations or even Dominican Republic, well, they are not the residents are not the most richest country in the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all relevant. So you're saying that some countries have a lot of poverty and so on.
Yeah.
And is that affecting destination competitiveness?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, yeah, I know a lot of people who don't go to India because they don't want to look upon the poverty that is there. It's always there. But it also flags issues such as if there is poverty in a country, then the policy question is, what can tourism do to relieve poverty? In what way can tourism help to rectify this situation? Whether it's poverty by location, in which case can we develop tourism facilities, or is it a case of not enough of the tourist dollar or euro getting to the poor people because of the influence of like high leakages and a lot of money going to international firms instead of locals? You know, the leakages issue. So issues like that do flag the question, what can we do by way of tourism development that can relieve the poverty and so on? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
If nobody, I have a question. Thank you, Larry, for this fantastic overview of competitiveness. And some of the research we have undertaken recently in the Canary Islands highlights a point, an important point that is lagging competitiveness. It's related with governance, the collaboration between not only between different levels of the public sector, collaboration, horizontal collaboration between different public sector municipalities, for example, and the collaboration among private firms, that is not, and between private firms and the public sector. There is the stakeholders, there is not a common goal, there is not a common strategy. And how do you think this can be analyzed or measured? Because we have found that it's a crucial factor in explaining competitiveness here.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the whole issues of governance are extremely important. And a lot of this industry initiatives come to nothing if the government is not demonstrating leadership and supporting tourism growth by allocating funds for the development of road systems and telecommunications and so on. So what you need is good management at the highest destination levels. And you need forceful tourism, people who support tourism, to have a say in the highest economic meeting places within a country. And unfortunately, many countries don't have ministers of tourism. Australia doesn't. We don't have a minister for tourism. We used to. Now, this is in a country where tourism is a really important sector, so we don't have a voice at the highest levels of government. And many other countries, same thing. There's no magic solution to that, but there does need to be very good opportunities for tourism and other sectors to talk, and tourism and the government to talk. And that requires institutional change, I think. But it's a very important issue there. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And it's a neglected issue too. In tourism, the intersection of politics and tourism has been by and large neglected by tourism researchers. And yet political issues are just so important because we need good communication between different stakeholders, different levels of government and so on. You need tourism people to be able to have a say and advise people at the highest levels of government, and for the highest levels to prioritise tourism in their thinking.
Thank you, Larry, for the talk. I'm sorry I was late, so I missed some part, but I want a specific, I would like you to answer a specific question. I heard recently that African countries are leading in the last 2 years, the growth of increasing infrastructure, especially hotel, like they are doubling this year with respect to last year's growth. Of course, sub-Saharan African countries, because we know the north is suffering. So I guess there's a movement of main tourism hotspots down south. Do you think, you know, Africa can become a leading region of tourism development that could also threaten, you know, the Mediterranean, including islands, no? Tourism development, no?
Well, potentially, Africa has enormous potential to be a very important player in world tourism. But there are lots of problems there. One is, of course, the low GDP per capita, so the economies are not wealthy. And so you don't have the level of general infrastructure that you have in other countries. There's also issues of corruption and so on, which increase the price of doing business in Africa. There's increasingly now security concerns in Africa. And I'll give you an example too. Just above Australia is a country called Papua New Guinea. And the people there are Melanesian, and it has, in many parts of it, extremely primitive civilizations. But culturally, it's just fantastic, and the scenery and so on is just fantastic. But no one goes there because of the lack of the lack of the people actually wanting tourism, and the concerns of security, because it's a very dangerous place. and well, just as South Africa is now increasingly dangerous. Anyway, enormous potential for Africa, but each African country has particular problems which militate against development of tourism. Kenya was perhaps the most developed in Africa, with an extremely robust modern tourism industry, hotel sector and so on. And then you get terrorist attacks there, and so the tourists don't go there. which is self-defeating because now, you know, the country is not earning the revenue that it used to. So they're issues that are very important. So we can talk about the competitiveness models and the resources that a country has. Africa in general has fantastic resources, but there are other issues that militate against the development.
¿Más preguntas?
Last chance. Larry is leaving tomorrow.
Yes, I'm leaving tomorrow.
But coming next year.
I hope so, yes. Yeah. I always like to come back. So nice to come back. Well, thank you very much. You've been very patient, and I hope you found some of that interesting. I was a bit I'll let you go in a minute, but I was a bit dismayed when Mercedes said that she'd bring all these students because I had geared the talk more of issues that would be of particular interest to more specialist tourism people. If I'd have known that all of you guys would come, I've got other types of presentations I could have made with interesting slides and pictures and so on. So next time I come, we might give a talk to your students, but I'd make it more general.
Okay.
You know?
That was a great talk anyway. We have the beaches and so on.
Yeah. Oh, the pictures are always good. I think that some of them are
You
quite...
have some for the line hanging pants.
Oh, that's right. The proof of climate change.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So, thank you very much.